Good morning, and thank you for joining the 10th Annual Tribal Healing to Wellness Court Virtual Enhancement Training. You have joined Session A1, titled Returning to Normal, Considerations for Healing to Wellness Courts in Challenging Times, presented by Lori Vallejos and myself, Christina Pacheco. I am joined by Janice Thompson, Program Assistant. Next slide, Janice. Guatsi, Opa, Bijou, Yate. Good morning. My name is Chris Pacheco, and I am a Tribal Healing to Wellness Court Specialist for the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. I am from the Pueblo of Laguna. So I'm coming to you from the beautiful state of New Mexico. So I'd like to have my co-presenter, Lori Vallejos, introduce herself.
Good morning, and I'm very honored to be with you this morning for the 10th Annual Healing to Wellness Court Virtual Enhancement Training. Currently, I am a counselor with the Pueblo of Laguna Behavioral Health, where I've been working there for 4.5 years. Last night, as I was thinking about how many years I have in the field, I've been doing the work for about 20 years, where I started out working with public housing and then moving to the state of New Mexico State Hospital, and finally finding my way to juvenile drug court in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It is at that time that I had my first experience with drug court, and I knew immediately that that was a program that was worth investing time in because I saw the results. 4.5 years ago, when I got to the Pueblo of Laguna and was offered the opportunity to sit as a wellness court team member, I jumped at the opportunity. And since that time, I've invested a majority of my time working within that program.
Thank you. So we wanted just to let you know that we present this to you with a grain of salt. We share this with you, but we also realize that all tribal programs, agencies are not at the same place. Our experience is coming from partially some of the tribes that I've worked with as a training and technical assistance specialist, as well as some of the work that Lori is currently doing in the Pueblo of Laguna and my tribe, the Pueblo of Laguna's response. But we also realize that the response to the challenging times, and they may vary. They may vary from, the virus that is going on. They also may vary from some of the wildfires that are going on or close to near some of our tribal communities. But we also realize that we're all not in the same place, that we may all have a lack of, the PPEs, that we may not have the same or similar safety trainings. We may have various leadership directives. I know for my tribe, we've had very good leadership directives that have not only affected our tribal members, but our tribal employees. We also may not have the space as we look at social distancing and possibly returning back to a workspace or a workplace, especially for those of us who have clients on a regular basis. Part of building a clinical relationship is sometimes being in the same office space, and that may be difficult right now. Also funding resources may be not as abundant in some communities. So we understand that. Also staff. We understand that some tribes and some communities and some agencies may not have the staff to respond to some of these issues going on. For example, to respond to ongoing crisis calls or to set up crisis lines, things like that. Also, access to medical testing. We realize that some communities may not have the response of being able to be tested on a regular basis in order for us to resume our normal business hours or to resume our normal office hours. So we felt this really important to just let you know that we understand that everybody is not at the same space, but we are all working with what we have. And I want to bring in Lori, because Lori also felt it very important for us to remember that those key components and those national standards that we utilize and that we go by as we conduct our Healing to Wellness courts, that we need to remember that those are things that we should still be paying attention to. So I'm going to bring in Lori and have her explain the layout of our presentation.
Thank you, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, we did think about the 10 key components when we were putting together this presentation. And as many of you have already realized as you enter the virtual rooms of today's enhancement training, one of the things that was written on that first page was this training will be centered around the tribal 10 key components and the National Association of Drug Court Professionals drug court standards. If you had the opportunity this morning to listen to the opening remarks given by Chris Pacheco, she made reference to that some sessions that normally would be a part of this enhancement training were not being offered at this time. And one of those is the 10 key components. We know how important these 10 key components, they guide our programs. And for many of you who are just entering into a team member for your wellness court, this might be something that you have not received yet. We wanted to highlight the key components throughout our presentation and tie them into what we're talking about today. Thank you, Chris.
Okay. So for this tribal response, we are focusing on key component number 1, which is an individual and community healing focus, which is also encompasses tribal nation building.
So as we look at the relationship between participants and the Healing to Wellness court team, we understand that the power of the relationship with the client is instrumental in the change process. All of you, depending on your roles, have a different relationship with the client as team members. So when we look at somebody who's a prospective client for your program, we'll see them at different points in the process. So for those of you who are public defenders, prosecutors, the judge, you might see this person at their first entry into a court hearing. Or if you're with a social service program, you might see them when they're in that crisis mode that maybe their child has been removed from the home. And the relationship starts there. For those of you who are case managers or probation officers, or maybe you're wearing both of those hats, which many of you do, you might see one of your clients come in that is just one day sober, who is without housing, who is without transportation, who lacks the support, and they're in your office and their world has just fallen apart and they don't know how they're going to recover from this. If you're a counselor or you're their therapist, we understand the importance of the therapeutic alliance. And I know from experience in working with clients, it doesn't matter what role or what relationship you have with our clients, the power of the relationship is so important. We can talk about modalities of treatment, we can talk about specific interventions, but oftentimes as I'm talking with clients and I say, what was it that was the turning point for you? And a majority of the time people will say, you know, I remember sitting there with the prosecutor who normally was the guy who was going to throw me in jail. And I remember them caring and them saying, you know, the punitive interventions of incarceration are not working, and we feel like there's something better for you. Or if you're a probation officer, you know, I've heard people say, you know, I remember sitting there with my probation officer and I can see that they cared about me getting well. So we know that while we have these great tools to use as a means of change, that relationship is important with the client. So right now, as we're in these difficult situations, we understand that our relationship with the clients are different. And we must be willing to think about how do we still provide that strong foundation of the relationship to facilitate the change. As we look at the benefit of group and how safety protocols have impacted this, we understand that many of us have not seen each other face to face as team members in quite some time due to safety precautions. We're not getting the benefit of sitting and talking with one another, learning from one another, due to having to abide by leadership directives from our tribal nations in order to ensure safety for all. As we look at key component number 6, incentives and sanctions, we understand that incentives and sanctions are a huge part of our program. When we're not able to meet as a group and one of our participants does well, we like to recognize that, and there's an incentive, whether that be praise through clapping, something said like good job, or some kind of monetary incentive. Incentives are powerful. And when we're not meeting as a group, we need to be creative on how we still recognize and celebrate these things that are happening for our clients that we want to reinforce. Additionally, when we look at sanctions, we understand that our sanctions look different now because of the current situation that we're in. Ordinarily, a couple of months ago, I was watching a webinar with Carolyn Harding, and in that she was talking about that we're always talking about that we need to find alternatives to incarceration. And in Wellness Court, we do a great job of that. But especially now in these times that we're in, many of us cannot use that as an option. So we need to be creative with our sanctions and see what we can do to ensure the safety of the community. As we look at key component number 5, and intensive supervision, we all know that the supervision when someone is in Healing to Wellness Court is greater than that of somebody who would be on a regular probation, and that's important. But the thing I wanted to highlight in this one is the case management part of this. As we're looking at the power of the relationship with the client, we understand that many of our participants are going to have additional needs considering the situations that we're in. So the case management part, I encourage all of you who are doing this case management, whether you're the probation officer or whether you're a counselor or you're with social service, however you can see that you can work that in is to really tailor the case management part to what's going on in our situation. And key component number 7, when we look at judicial interaction, we know the power of the interaction that participants have with the Wellness Court team as they attend their weekly or bi-weekly or monthly, however your program is set up, how they attend the court hearings. But what about the interaction between team members? So for many of you, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, is for many of you, it was powerful going to our staffings and sitting down with your team and being able to cross-train and understand different roles within the team. And right now, because of the safety measures that are in place, we're not all able to do that. So I want you to think about these key components as you're looking and you're thinking about that instrumental process of change and the correlation with the relationship with the client. So I want to talk now about the Healing to Wellness staffing. And I want to talk about, I'm going to speak from the Pueblo of Laguna and how things are now with our staffing. Prior to the situation that we're in, our staffing would be every week. And what we would do is we would have a working lunch where all of us would meet prior to the court hearing happening. During that time, we would be able to talk about clients' progress. Sitting at the table would be all the different team members, ranging from the judge, the prosecutor, public defender, counselors, probation officers, police officer, and any other community members that were sitting on our team at that time. During this time, we could elaborate some on participants' progress, some issues that may have come up during the week with our participants that needed addressing from the court. It was in this time that if we had new team members, they were given the opportunity to ask questions about our program, clarification on why things were happening the way they were. And typically we would spend 1 hour or more, depending on our number of participants on our program, talking about the clients and what was going on with them for the week. What it looks like now, and the way it's looked since the beginning of our current situation, is that minimal members have been in the court here, in the courtroom. The rest of us have been logging on through Zoom. This is a big change. And while there are some constants in the staffing and the procedure to the staffing, we still talk about clients. We still talk about what's going on. We talk about some things that are going right, incentives that need to be given to clients, sanctions that may need to happen during the week. It's very different now. And I know that because we haven't had the opportunity to all sit together, there's a piece missing. Now, we may not have any control over that at this time, but it's important for us to think about what we need to do. You know, as we look at it, we look at what's our plan right now and what do we want things to look like. So I encourage you, as your program, is you start thinking about how do you see your program going back to a place where it was before? What are some things that may have happened during this time that are working well? And could those things be incorporated into your staffing? The next thing I want to talk about is training for staff members. So I am pleased to see how many of you who are logged on today and doing just that. We're receiving this cross training, and where normally we would be sitting in Palm Springs right now, right now we're still logged on, and the training for staff members is important. For a lot of our programs, we have new staff members who have come on board, and this might be their first taste at what an enhancement training looks like, or what a Healing to Wellness Court training looks like. So I encourage you to keep thinking about accessing staff trainings and have it be, virtually at this time. When we look at the key component number 9, it talks exactly about this, the continuing interdisciplinary and community education. Earlier I was talking about the staffing. We had an opportunity to learn each other's role in the staffing. And right now, that's missing because of not being able to sit in the same rooms. So I encourage you to keep looking for trainings such as this, or also looking to NADCP, because I know that they've been, since early on, since March, they've been offering a continuing education program. So that's another great opportunity to learn about drug courts. And as we look at key component 10, team interaction, how are you still interacting with your team members, even if you're not able to do so in person? Some of this could be, are you guys, I know a lot of programs who have emails that are set up for wellness court teams. Do you guys have meetings when necessary if issues come up? So the team interaction is extremely important as we look at bettering our programs. The team interaction is not just sitting at our staffing, but also looking at the maintenance of ongoing commitments, communication, coordination, and cooperation among Tribal Healing to Wellness Court team members. An example I'll give about this one that I really was pleased to see as we were looking at within the Pueblo of Laguna, when this current situation hit, I was pleased to see that the judge and our case manager, that they understood that not all team members were going to have the opportunity to be sitting within the courtrooms. How they ensured this key component number 10 is they required that all team members, whether you're able to attend that week of the staffing, they were going to submit their report to the court. So the court had the information about our wellness court participants' progress. This was a perfect example of the team interaction that was necessary for the success of our clients. So as we look at the court's role during challenging times, the first one is really hits home to me, because at the beginning of this difficult time, we had a lot of participants who were getting close to completing our program and to graduation. And for reasons beyond our control, we weren't able to have our graduation ceremonies as normal. We know, as we sit with our participants from day one of the program, all the way through the program, how important this time is for them. We know how important it is for them to hit their 30 days of sobriety. We know how important it is to get that 6 months, and when they're talking about getting chips for their sobriety. And lastly, the final part of the formal part of the program with the graduation, we know this is huge for them. This could possibly be one of the first successes that our participants have had. So I encourage you to think about, how are you celebrating graduations within your program? I've heard a lot of great examples of how programs are doing this. In these times, we have an opportunity to think outside the box of what we were normally doing. Could something be done like we're doing here today? Could something be done that we would do something online to ensure the safety precautions that need to happen within our tribal communities, but still celebrate the success? I've heard of some incentives and graduations party ceremonies happening where the participant is able to pick up the food and meet within their home with their family and still do something virtual. That could be something that your program is doing or would like to incorporate into the court's role during these times. The next thing, as I look at the judge's role, I feel like this could be a whole session in and of itself. Typically, depending on what we do within our team, there's a couple of key components that we do every day, and the other ones we're mindful and aware of. But the judge's role is very different in that all of these 10 key components is something that the judge needs to know and how to implement this as needed within his time on the bench or within the circle. So when we look at typically some of the judge's role, we know that the judge is the convener. He brings together the resources. He brings together the resource of the community. He's in contact with tribal council. We know that the judge is the protector of rights. We know that the judge is the gatekeeper of the program. The judge is the one that will let people into the program. The judge is the champion of wellness. The judge really bridges the healers, who are the treatment providers, the probation officers, the case managers, with the hearers, the prosecutor, the public defender. The judge also encourages and enforces the rules. On many of our teams, the judge is the coach or the captain. This is the person who brings everything together. This is the one who walks into the staffing and facilitates the staffing to happen. He encourages us when he sees team members who are looking like they might be having difficulty in some areas. He encourages. He enforces that we're doing what we say we're going to do. He enforces those MOUs. And we also know that the judge is an evaluator of participants' progress and an evaluator of program. Are we meeting the goals that we say we're going to do? And a couple of other things that the judge's role is a nation builder. He's a team and community builder, in addition to a lifelong teacher and learner. So as we look at the judge's roles traditionally before any of this situation had happened, we now need to think about how is the judge's role different, or how can those same roles now fit or broaden to fit our current situation. Many of your programs or many of your tribal communities have started up new programs to address the needs of the people. It is important when we look at the judge as a champion for health and wellness. Does your judge know what resources are available for people who are coming in front of the court? Does your judge know, as an encourager and an enforcer, does your judge know what resources are available if there's sanctions to be carried out within the community? Does your judge know how our participants are going to ensure the safety and adhere to those guidelines, and also get the requirements of the program taken care of? When we look at the judge being the coach or captain, in this time, it's important, as I mentioned earlier when I gave the example of how pleased I was when the judge says, if you're not able to appear because you're on a hybrid model within your department, we need to ensure that there's communication so that our participants are still getting the services that they need. So how is your judge doing that to make sure that everyone is fulfilling their roles and their duties? And also in this time, as we look at the judge being the coach or the captain, how is the motivation level of your program? As the judge's role, they are constantly assessing this. And when I say program, the motivation of the program, I'm talking about participants and staff. So the judge's role has changed during this situation. As we look at key component number 7, I mentioned it in a previous slide, the judicial interaction is important. And in the judge's role, it's important for we as a team to have the opportunity to meet with the judge, in addition to our participants still getting that time. Best practice says that a minimum of 3 minutes with each participant is optimal. And we need to ensure that our participants have that opportunity to talk with the judge about how are things going. How are they feeling right now? And maybe even, whereas in normal times, participants may not have processed this much as they were appearing in court, they're able to have that time to say what's going on. So the judicial interaction with the judge and other team members is extremely important. As we look at key component number 2, and we look at the referral points and legal process, we know that our referrals come from many different places. So this could be from a public defender or prosecutor as someone appears in court for a charge related to alcohol or drugs. This could be from a social service provider who has just taken a child into custody because of a parent who is under the influence or who is testing positive for alcohol or drugs. We know that it could be from a community member who says, I need help getting my life back on track. I would like in your program. For those of you who are clinicians and you're doing assessments, referrals come from us. We don't have to see that it's court ordered or or coming from the court that someone has gotten into some trouble there. If someone comes in to do a screening or assessment with us, we can definitely look and say, you know, we do have a program for you, and that provides something more than outpatient services. So as we look at our roles right now, it's important for us to think about things are going to look a little bit different right now because of the situation we're in. Whereas to normally, we might have seen somebody get a charge for a DUI or a possession of a narcotic, and that might have been a standard to say we need to assess them for wellness court. It might not look like that right now. It may be a crisis call that we respond to, and someone says, you know, I'm just feeling depressed. I feel down, and I've been drinking, or I've been using drugs to self-medicate. So we need to remind ourselves that these referrals are going to look different right now, but to ensure the legal process and still offer due fair process rights. As we look at key component number 3, we look at legal screening and clinical screening and eligibility. So as I was talking about in key component number 2, that we're offering those screenings. So for some of your programs, if you're not meeting in person right now, how are you doing these screenings? I'll give an example with what's been going on with me for the last several months. We have allowed new participants into our program, and I know that may not be the case with all of your programs. I understand some of you may be on hold with bringing people in, but if you are, how are you doing those screenings? You know, have you set up something where you can do this virtual? And if so, what does that look like for you now? You know, with the example that I have is I have a client right now who I have not seen face to face due to the safety measures in place. Everything that has happened has been done via telephone or telehealth at this point, and continues to go on every week. Now, when we're looking, you know, at going forward, you know, that is a short-term goal, is that we were still going to allow people into our program. Going forward, we're working on measures, our SOPs, to ask for in-person sessions, knowing that this is a temporary thing that we're doing with our virtual or our telehealth. But we still need to ensure that if we're looking at key component number 3 and we're looking at bringing people into our programs, that we are able to screen people for entry into Healing to Wellness Court.
So some of the probation considerations during this time, as you know, for those of you who are in a fully, you know, functioning or, you know, operational Healing to Wellness Court or drug court program, you know that supervision is a big part of the process. And part of that is drug testing and home or office visits, and if you have a curfew. So these are some of the things that have been affected. You know, when Lori and I and the rest of my TTA specialists have gone and worked with other communities, we often advocate, and, you know, and one of our key components and one of the national standards is when conducting drug tests, they should be random, but they should be also observed or witnessed. Now, that is very difficult in this time right now of whether or not we can get someone in to do a urine drug test and actually watch them, or how many people we allow into the office, or, you know, what is our random schedule, because sometimes our offices may be closed. You know, if we go in and do a home visit, are we being safe in doing that home visit? You know, whereas, you know, when I was a probation officer, I, you know, was able to go into someone's home, go to their living space and look in their items. all of that, all that thoroughness. Now it may look like I'm just going to the door, or I'm going within 6 feet, or I am masked, or I have a face shield, or I've got gloves on, or I may not even be allowed in the home. Okay. So these are considerations for probation and doing those supervision type kind of activities. Also, are these individuals allowed to come to your office? We spoke recently with, actually Lori spoke recently with our Healing to Wellness Court program manager or program coordinator here at the Pueblo of Laguna, Christine Cisneros. And from her observation and just her vibe of how things are going, there seemed to be a looseness of the supervision, that feeling. So I know that she was making plans, or we know she was making plans to move, to tighten things up a little bit more, maybe have a little bit more office visits, as she's being allowed to by our own tribal restrictions, or maybe being allowed to do some more drug testing. So these are things that have been affected, and these are some of the questions that we've gotten. Some of the other sites that I've worked with have gone to some of the patches, the detection patches. Some of them have gone to maybe drug testing at larger labs. Having, I know this totally goes against the randomness, but having, set hours that they're open to do things. But yeah, this definitely has been impacted. So once again, if you all have thought out of the box and have come up with any ideas on how your community or your court is doing drug testing, it's one of those $50 million questions that we always get asked, and it would be great if you could share how you're doing that, do some peer-to-peer work with that. Curfews is also another thing which may or may not have been affected. In my own tribal community, we have a curfew of 9 p.m. And now it is not only just enforced by, those people who would do enforcement for a Healing to Wellness Court. We have our village officers who set up stations, and, or they may go do a drive through the village. So how is it that your Healing to Wellness Court is handling curfews in this day and age? Are they following whatever the proposed or the tribal executive orders are? Okay, so those are also things to take into consideration. Then how are you observing those? Are you doing phone call-ins? Are you, maybe getting with certain officials who can go in and, do a survey of wherever that home is? So those are things. That hits on definitely key component number 5, which is intensive supervision, which is some of the things that we do in Healing to Wellness Court to ensure compliance of Healing to Wellness Court requirements, to ensure of any kind of abstinence during the Healing to Wellness Court time, and as well as, making sure that no new criminal acts are being conducted during their time in Healing to Wellness Court, which is a very public safety type kind of issue.
So as we look at treatment considerations now, I want to mention 42 CFR Part 2 Substance Abuse Confidentiality Regulation. So for those of you who are treatment providers, we know that 42 CFR Part 2 is the federal regulation governing the confidentiality of drug and alcohol abuse treatment and prevention records. So prior to this situation, the regulation would say that we needed releases of information, or we needed consent from our participants in order to share information. For many of you, as people get into your program, this is one of the first things that the case manager or the coordinator or probation officer, whoever is sitting down with the client and talking about the program, will have that signed, allowing us to talk with the other team members about the overall progress that's in treatment with the client. Right now, there's been some changes by the Health and Human Service Administration for this 42 CFR Part 2. And some of there's been while HIPAA regulations still apply, there's been a waiver that has been given during this current situation. If you're not familiar with what this waiver is about, and specifically about the areas that this addresses, I would encourage you to go on to the Health and Human Service Administration, to their website, read about this. It's something that you're going to have to get familiar with. But a couple of the things, I want to highlight a couple of things with this right now that has changed, is where ordinarily we would have to have that written consent to disclose information. Because of the current situation and that we're not able to always meet in person with someone, at this time, they're allowing us to get a verbal consent with the understanding that at the first available time, a written consent will happen, and that you properly documented this. So for whatever health records you're using, whether that's electronic health records system or if you have paper files at this time, it's important that we document this, that we had Jane who said it was all right if we disclose information of a referral to residential treatment, and that Jane will be in on Tuesday to sign the paper ROI. So that's the important thing to remember right now. We are still under HIPAA regulations, but it's changed just a bit. For many of us who are doing the virtual programming, they started talking about what are some things that what would be considered the best practices at this time for individual and group therapy. So we know when we're looking at key component number 4, we know that as far as treatment providers, we're going to be doing individual treatment plans. They're going to be phased out for our program. We are going to address any case management issues that need to happen. If there's someone with co-occurring disorders, we need to figure out and do treatment for substance use and co-occurring simultaneously. But best practices for individual and group therapy right now also need to be considered. Some of these best practices that if you are doing individual and group therapy, one of the big things about is the issue of confidentiality. How are we ensuring confidentiality within our virtual programming? So for those of you who are using virtual platforms, there are some virtual platforms that you can look up, and I would just, if you're interested in that, you would just look under HIPAA guidelines, confidentiality, type in some keywords and virtual platforms, and you'll get a hit on which ones are HIPAA approved. But if at all possible, that you are ensuring that you have one of those platforms. The other thing, if you're doing the group therapy, is best practice would say right now that as you would have clients, as if they were in person, you would be having them sign a confidentiality agreement for group, that this still goes out and applies for your virtual programming. An example of this is I did send one out as we started our group therapy and the individual therapy. I sent out something that to the client that they were to acknowledge that they were to ensure the confidentiality in these circumstances. We know that right now a lot of people are within the home, right? So kids may be in the home, other family members may be in the home, and our participants are trying to do their individual and their group counseling. In order for clients to feel safe, they need to know that the information is confidential. So can they secure an area within their home to do their program? Even more so when we look at the group therapy. Clients need to know that if they're being asked to share, that all other group members are also ensuring confidentiality so that what they share isn't getting broadcasted to other people in the home. The next thing, when we look at fidelity to the model of selected treatment material, most of us within our programs are using evidence-based treatment. And part of what makes it evidence-based is fidelity to the model that we're using. So if you were a team member as a treatment provider prior to this current situation, you probably were trained in one of the models. A very common model for treatment is the moral recognition therapy. And one of the things that they stress is that there needs to be fidelity to the model in order for this to be effective. So in these times of virtual programming, are you ensuring fidelity to your model? What changes if they have to be made because it's just not possible? Are the changes minimal? And maybe getting a hold of the whatever training material that you're using, whatever model you're using, and saying, can we make this adjustment because we have to? We cannot ensure the exact fidelity to the model, and talk with them about how they would suggest that happening. But we need to remember, even in these times, as different as they are for us, we still need to try to protect that fidelity in order for it to be effective and the clients could get the optimal result for your program. As I've been
Lori,
talking, yes.
I'm sorry, Lori, before we move on, we had a question, and I think
Sure.
it's so timely to answer it here.
Sure.
But we had a question of if there is a capability to electronically sign or are available for a ROI, for a release of information form, and if that is an acceptable form of consent. And Denise asked this question.
Sure. So Denise, I don't know how you're maintaining your records within your agency. I know that for the Pueblo of Laguna, we do have access to electronic signing. And that's something that you can either look with, if you have an IT department, they would be a good starting point because usually everything starts with them as far as any electronic records, and then ensuring that this is acceptable to ensure the confidentiality. If you're running off an electronic system that is through an outside agency that you've contracted with, they will definitely know. And most of them do offer the electronic signing right now. For those of you who don't have access to the electronic, it might be thinking of how we can get these documents, even if we're not able to meet face-to-face. So it could be that, you're looking within how to leave something in a place, or mail something out, that a blank document, but still ensuring that it's confidential upon returning. So, but yes, going back to your questions, the electronic documents can be used.
Thank you, Lori.
Thanks, Denise, for that question. I know that that's such a big issue right now that we've all had to figure out how to work with. So as we look at access to residential treatment or sober living homes, many of you may have found that they were almost non-existent at the start of this situation. Some of those have opened up, and it's important for us as treatment providers to know what our resources are, in addition to what are the directives from our tribal government to accessing these. We always look at hoping that our wellness program is going to provide the support and the resources needed for our participants to succeed. We also know that sometimes our clients need to go to a higher level of care. Are these available in your area? Or does your tribal government allow clients to access these if they are outside of your area? For example, crossing state lines. What is your directive from tribal government about tribal members leaving the state. So right now, what I know is that we have been able to access residential treatment in other states. It does require us talking with tribal leadership about, and they understand they want tribal members to get better. But they also have to ensure safety for the community. So it does take a little bit of work and coordination of that. If any of you are interested in learning more about residential treatment or sober living homes, I'd be willing to share some information with you if you would like to email me and give me your name and specifically what you'd be looking for. I can take some time and get into contact with you about this. So
Lori?
again, yes.
I'm sorry. Before we move on, we had a question about from Mary. She was wondering if you could please repeat the evidence-based treatment modality that you often see used, as well as any other evidence-based treatments you see used within Healing to Wellness courts.
Sure. And Chris, I'm going to mention a couple that I know, and I'm going to ask you to also, because I know you've done a lot of TA visits where they use different ones. The one that I'm familiar with, and I'm familiar with it because I worked with it when I was working with Second Judicial Court in Albuquerque. And we also use it within the Pueblo of Laguna. It's moral recognition therapy, MRT. So if you punch in on your computer on the search MRT therapy, you'll get a hit on that. They're out of Georgetown, Tennessee. And my understanding is that they still are doing trainings for that modality of treatment. It has moved to virtual trainings. They do offer an entry-level training to be trained to use the model, and they offer an advanced training. I've been trained in both of those, and a lot of programs do use that. I also know some other programs use Red Road. Chris, do you have any others that you think of right now?
Some of the Healing to Wellness court programs that I've worked with on the treatment side have used the Matrix
Yes.
program. It's an intensive outpatient program. I know a few programs that are utilizing it. It's very manualized. Also, in regards to doing some trauma work, I have also Seeking Safety used in Healing to Wellness courts. And I have also seen women in recovery and men in recovery. So if you have the opportunity to split the genders in your Healing to Wellness court program, those are some of the programs that I've seen used, as well as, like you mentioned, Wellbriety, and then of course those standards that we use as clinicians as cognitive behavioral therapy, those techniques such as motivational interviewing as well.
So the other thing in going back to best practices, and Chris and I we do a training on co-occurring disorders. We understand that, so as Chris was talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, EMDR, different modalities of treatment that can be used, we know that best practices says that we will, for many of our participants, they come in with co-occurring disorders. So there's a substance use disorder in addition to possibly depression, anxiety, some trauma. So best practices would say that we're treating both of those. We don't treat the substance use disorder first and then say we'll treat the depression later, because neither one will be effective. We need to follow best practice standards and ensure that we are treating all the issues that present at the time of the clinical assessment. So now let's look at the participants' progress in treatment. Like Chris said as we started off, we understand that every program is different right now. When we look at the participants' progress in treatment, we might start seeing a regression in progress of treatment or program advancement. As I was talking about co-occurring disorders, This is a hard time for people. The situation we're in is difficult. People who would otherwise have not had depression or anxiety may now be saying that they're feeling symptoms of. This could mean a regression in the progress of treatment or program advancements. Also, right now, as I think, I'm a mother and I have my children who are doing homeschool at this time, the virtual programming. It can be difficult for our participants who are just trying to figure out how to stay clean and sober from alcohol and drugs to now have to have all these other responsibilities that they hadn't been having to spend 100% of their time with. All of these host of issues that are happening, our clients could start regressing in their progress. When we see that, it's important for us to look at how do we adapt our program? How do we adapt our treatment plans? How are we going to help our clients? Because we want our clients to succeed. We don't want our clients to stay in our program for years and years. We want our clients to advance. We want them to stay clean and sober. And we want them to go even beyond that. We're not just asking for sobriety in the program. We're wanting them to have the skills necessary for long-term recovery. Some other issues that you may be seeing right now is participants going through the phases too quickly due to the lack of peer interaction and accountability. Earlier, I was talking about the power of the group, and I was talking about it referring to the power of the team. Right now, I want us to think about the power of the group therapy. When I walk into the rooms of group therapy, it is powerful to hear the conversations and see the dynamics happening amongst participants. When you get a new participant who's in the program walk in and they want to start storytelling or it's amazing how other participants can pick that up. They know this. They've walked that walk. So without the group right now, how are you ensuring that participants aren't just going through their phases too quickly? How are group members or other participants able to interact and hold each other accountable? Because this is part, again, when I talk with our participants saying, what was the most, what was the best thing, or what was the most influential part of your program? They'll say, man, I remember walking into group and I couldn't lie to them. They already knew everyone. I had no way. I tried to lie and they caught me on it. So that peer interaction is so important, and being held accountable within that setting is important. The last thing that I think about when I think about the participants' progress in treatment is, are you seeing a decreased motivation for the continued virtual programming? Initially, when we started this current situation, people were very motivated to get whatever platform set up that you were going to hold your sessions, your group therapy. But as time has went on, is there a decreased motivation? And if there is, what can we do as team members to ensure this continued motivation? We don't want our participants to just stop. We don't want them to say, this is too much and I can't do this. We want to work with our participants to ensure their success. For those of you who have been keeping information regarding your program in regards to the monitoring and evaluation key component number 8, here's a great time to look back at your numbers, at your records, and say, typically prior to this, our participants were moving through phase 1 in 13 weeks. Right now, we're seeing with our participants, it's taken them 15 or 16 weeks. What is that about? what's going on with that? So here's a good time for those of you who have those numbers and that data and the research to look at that. We've had enough time with our virtual programming to have some good numbers to compare them to.
Okay, so in this virtual age of, this time that we're doing a virtual conference, and for those of us who have been on multiple Zoom meetings, multiple conference calls, there are some disadvantages to virtual program. When everything started becoming challenging and things started happening, one of the first things that I thought of was someone doing recovery in isolation. When someone is early on in recovery, we often tell them not to isolate themselves. Find a support group, find some, this is the power of, for those individuals who do AA or who engage in AA, this is the power of that, having a community to work with. So oftentimes in these challenging times right now, people are doing recovery in isolation. They are not able to meet in person with a group. They're not able to go to a clinician or go to their therapist. So unfortunately, that's one of the disadvantages of a virtual program. Also, from my experience as a TTA provider, tribal communities often have problems and access to technology. There's not a large internet capability, bandwidth, and then we're also competing with individuals who are, we're competing with those students who are now online in school. I had a Zoom presentation recently where I was kicked off mid-sentence and it was 2 o'clock and I'm thinking, oh, everybody was on school. So tribal communities having access to technology is also a disadvantage. Also not being able to see people in person in vivo, because I know when I was both a probation officer and a clinician, one of the things I looked at and saw was my client, my probationer, coming into my office. Were they appropriately dressed for the season? How did they look? How did they present? Did they talk to me? Did they shy away? Did they have an odor of lasting alcohol on them? All of those things, all of those nonverbal, all of those things that we can see, we can't do that anymore. Also, wellness court teams losing that face-to-face connection with one another. Lori mentioned that earlier. When I was part of the Pueblo Laguna Healing to Wellness Court team, I knew every Tuesday at lunchtime, I got to get my lunch so I can go to staffing and I can be with my Healing to Wellness Court team. That is missing. So not only are our participants missing out, we are missing out as a team. Also, decreased alcohol and drug testing is a possibility. We mentioned that earlier. And then also the increased risk of co-occurring disorders. I have heard of an increase in anxiety issues either have arisen or are getting worse. And then also you're talking about some depression because we're not able to see our loved ones. We're not able to travel as often. So those are some things that are also going on. And then, we like to think that those online support groups or the online groups that we refer our participants to are safe. And I know that the developers of them and the organizers of them make every effort to keep them as safe as they can. But we also have online predators that can show up and that can take advantage of some of our more vulnerable participants and clients, those individuals who are maybe new to this situation, maybe not as technologically savvy. So, we run the risk of that. And then just, for those individuals who identify with a home group, having that connection, having that support is also unfortunately not there. So, it's some of those things that, when we were able to be closer than 6 feet together, are not there for us anymore. So finding ways to keep connected, stay connected. Next slide.
Chris, can I pause you here for a minute to answer
Sure.
a question? All right, I saw a question somebody was asking about any recommendations that we would have if a participant lacked the technology to attend the online, maybe 12-step meetings or support group meetings. Some of the things that we are offering or that I've been working with my clients with is that for those that have access to technology, that's great because there's an unlimited amount of resources out there right now as far as 12-step meetings that they can attend. But we also know that that's not all of our clients. So we certainly want to make sure that our clients are still able to meet the requirements asked by the Healing to Wellness Corps program. I've been creative in trying to sometimes, throughout the week, I will give out daily reflections. When someone gets into our program right now, I am able to get out, a daily reflections book so that every day they can go in and they can read the daily reflection. They can write on that, do a page or two of their reflection, their thoughts, how this relates to their sobriety or their life going on right now. I will send out specific topics to people depending on what's going on with them. So if a client is really lacking self-care and I'm seeing that this is causing a lot of stress because they're not able to do this, we might do a paper or a topic on self-care. What does that look like for you? How are you going to do this to ensure your sobriety? If somebody is lacking coping mechanisms, I might talk with them about saying, it might be a good idea to explore how do we cope with difficulty or change happening in your life. And that could be an opportunity for self-care, especially because, as I said, we don't want to make it any more stressful than it already is for our clients. So working with them to figure out ways around that is important. I hope this answered your question. And if you would like more ideas, again, if you could email me and I can talk with you after or later on in this week.
So let's just kind of run through these. So, in returning to the new normal, what is that going to look like? Really, it's going to look like something very different for each of our communities. But, this will be an opportunity for our Healing to Wellness Corps to regroup, do the business of Healing to Wellness Corps, which is maybe reviewing our policies and procedures, reviewing our phase structure, all of those things that unfortunately sometimes bleed into our staffing. So maybe an opportunity to regroup on those themes is a good time. Also, maybe reconnecting from those participants who have gone AWOL or who have absconded. Maybe having, and I know this may be a little bit of a stretch, but maybe having a period of time where there's a time where if they absconded prior, maybe they can be allowed back in. Let's work with them. Okay. Also, the team being flexible more than usual on participants' progress. It's going to look different. Any behavioral milestones, those are also going to look different, and any responses to their behavior definitely will look different because whereas we may have used jail as the last possible sanction, it may not be available to us. So we need to take a look at how we respond to those behaviors. Also, it is now not only just a public safety concern, it is now a public health concern. So being mindful of those things. There were a few, and we have like a couple minutes left because Dennis is also doing very well on making sure that we keep on time. But there was a couple of really pertinent questions, Lori, that I wanted to point out. One of them was Judge Fox from the Pub of Laguna asked about virtual home visits, and I do know that they do virtual home visits, so that is an option. And then also there was a question regarding what could we do for people that had been in treatment and fell off 5 or 6 times. The provider gave up on them and does not want to help them anymore. They say that the provider has said that they've given up on them. Also for people that have not been in trouble and can't get any funding from the providers, any help on staying sober. So the question really is the treatment provider kind of has given up on that participant who, says, who hasn't gone in 5 or 6 times. So, that, and I know as a treatment provider, that is always a $1 million question.
So how I would respond to that is we don't know how many times it's going to take for somebody to change. Even though there were 5 previous attempts, and I say attempts because I don't think any of them are failures. I think there's some growth and some learning that happens every time somebody will attempt recovery and sobriety. As treatment providers, it's not unheard of to hear something like treatment providers, they're tired, they're burned out. They might think, no, I don't want to work with this client. I wonder if there's other providers within your area that are also providing the service to your program. Sometimes it could be, earlier I was talking about the team interaction and how we are, what our job is, and reminding ourselves that we're in a position to help people with their sobriety. Trying to join and bring the treatment provider in again, and asking them to look, what is our goal? What is the overall goal? As we have a goal for people to get clean and sober and for the well-being of the community. So it might require some work with that, looking at other options who are willing to work with participants. Chris, do you have any suggestions for that one?
I not right now, but I just want to remind people that Lori and our email information is located either in our bios that you may see. But for now, and I apologize, Lori, for cutting us off a little bit short, but I've got to I have virtually run to another presentation. So what I'd like to do is I want to thank you all for attending session A1, Returning to Normal, Considerations for Healing to Wellness Courts in Challenging Times. And once again, please make sure you take some time to locate our resource area, our network lounge, and our exhibit hall area for any additional information. And I want to thank you for joining us today, and please enjoy the rest of the training. Thank you. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.